Okay, folks, here we go. This is the ITP 3353 course. The official title is Introduction to English. Introduction to English to ASL Interpreting. A couple of twos in there. Anyway, I like to think of this as consecutive interpreting from English to ASL. So when we talk about the consecutive series of training, this is a course in the consecutive series of training. All right. Let's think about this for just a second before we get going with other things. It would have helped if I had that clicked. Okay, let's try this. Hi. What is interpreting? In its most basic form, your models of interpreting all include these components. Something in, something done, and something out. Every model that's worth anything of interpreting has that. We call the something in a source text. We call the something out a target text. And quite frankly, we call the something done magic, because we really don't know what any individual person does. We can try to get at it, and the only evidence we have to work with is what did the source text say and what did the target text look like or say. And is it accurate, and how do you determine accuracy, and is it a word-for-word equivalency? Is it a meaning-for-meaning equivalency? Is it this means gets this thing accomplished, and this thing gets this thing accomplished? Those are different ways of having equivalency. Those different ways that I just covered are access, meaning, and function. And I have other words for these things, which I can't think at the moment, but that covers it. Whoops. Didn't mean to do that. Let's try that. And access is largely a phonological to morphological level of processing. Meaning is essentially semantics, but we can think of it as being syntactic. We can start there. Syntactic to semantic processing. And the function is largely pragmatics, discourse, which is not pragmatics, but I put it in the same level as pragmatics, that it's a level above semantics. And stylistics, but I should put that in parentheses too. Stylistics. Okay. So why am I telling you all this? If you're going to be able to do good interpreting, you have to practice. You have to do interpreting to be a better interpreter. And you are likely to go through these stages, these stages in order. That it will be easier for you to do access interpreting to begin with, because you don't have to be that fluent in the target language to be able to achieve that. And as you realize, oh, that's not the conceptually right signs, you might get to a meaningful or syntactic and semantic interpretation. And then as you get more aware of deaf culture, we hope you get to that level. If you go right into educational interpreting and never do anything else, there's a good chance that you will never be interpreting at this level. And this is where real interpreting takes place. You can get paid and make a living working in these levels, and there's lots of deaf consumers who are happy enough to have your services there. But to be a full service provider, you want to be able to reach into the deeper levels of pragmatics and even stylistics, be able to sign in different ways so that you can look like that person sounds in whatever way that makes sense. That being said, this class is asking you to practice interpreting in a safe way, and what we do is we use this process called ghost interpreting. That's the first part we're going to talk about. And a full 1/5 of the course, or 2 grade levels, is tied to accomplishing this. How do you document this? You enter it into Canvas. Can you fake it? Absolutely, you can fake it. Please don't do that, because okay, fine. You can fake it if you want to, but it's not getting you anywhere, except it's getting you a grade. and it's getting you graduated with a credential that says you can do something that you can't actually do. Except we probably will catch you in the practicum because you won't be able to do what you're supposed to do, and therefore you won't complete the practicum, and therefore you won't complete the degree. So practice, do the actual practice. This is a little bit hard for online instruction because you don't have a cohort group member sitting right next to you that you can agree to go to this class and do ghost interpreting for. It means you're probably going to be stuck doing this on your own. If you're a working interpreter, you may count your working hours that you're actually paid as ghost interpreting hours. I just want you to, I want to make sure that you're doing the physical labor of keeping your hands up for 15 minutes at a time, 20 minutes at a time, and mentally processing that English text that you're listening to. So what is ghost interpreting? Ghost interpreting is you have a real, interactive, spoken text, preferably a classroom or workshop environment, that if somebody wanted to interrupt, they could. And there are real people listening to this message who may have paid for this because they're students in a class or taking a workshop, or for whatever reason they need to be there because it's a meeting for a club and members are expected to attend. Whatever it is, there's a real person generating most of the message, and there are real people, for the most part, receiving that message, and there's potential for interaction to occur. There is your setting. It could be anywhere. It could be a church service. Do you have to have deaf people present? Absolutely not. You don't have to have deaf people present for ghost interpreting. That's why we call it ghost interpreting, because you're not actually interpreting for a consumer, but all the other variables are intact. There really is a source text to work with. It really is spontaneous and variable, right? They could change their mind and talk about the weather at any moment. So it's not scripted out. It's not something that you can completely rehearse ahead of time. So here's this real environment. You're going to interpret in this real environment. You're going to have people looking at you thinking, gosh, that's kind of weird, that person waving their hands about in front of the room. You have to deal with that and get over that and let them get over it too. And ideally, this is where you would have a team member. So if you can have a team member who understands what you're doing, please work with them so that they can take useful notes. Because that's the way that this is designed to run. A ghost interpreting assignment is 2 people, or perhaps 3, but 2 people go to an assignment and they take turns interpreting that assignment while the other one writes down what happened. And what happened means we encountered this word. What's the sign for that word? I don't know. Write it down. We encountered this word. What's the sign for that? Well, I think it's this. I don't care. Write it down. They said this word and I came up with this great word. Just, okay, well, write it down. Okay, we're going to tackle the issue of vocabulary, because that's going to be the first struggle you have, and that's this level of what's morphological. Good hope if I spelled that right. No, that's not right. Morphological. Morphological. Are you saying that I was already correct? Where's the G? Morphologic. Logic. It's not an L, it's a G. There we go. Morphologic. This is the problem of an interpreter who's worked too hard sometimes. Morphological. There we go. It's a simple matter than that. Just sound it out. Morphological processing means what's the sign for that word? What's the word for that sign? And I'll tell you what they said. Okay, but when you're done, do I understand what the point was? Well, do I understand what they mean? This is a key thing. If you haven't seen me tell you this before, learn it now. Don't ask your consumer, do you understand me? Right? Because they will usually say, oh, signing clear. What you want to ask is, do you understand the point, what it means? And this is where you might get crestfallen. Sign clear, not understand the point. Vague, don't know, blah, blah, blah. Understand signs, understand words. Point, don't understand. Okay, so the function isn't being achieved. The meaning isn't necessarily being achieved. But to get there, you got to get through the words. So the point here is not that you learn the word for that sign or the sign for that word, but that you start thinking about what is the meaning in that context, in that situation, of those words that you are struggling to have a sign for. You have the signs already. You have all the vocabulary you need to talk about every subject in the world. you might not be able to be perfectly efficient, and it might not be the way that deaf people would talk about it, but you can get there. And this is the point. I want you to think about, how do you get there? What the normal process is you go out and do, and you come back to the classroom and you have your notes, and you throw all this vocabulary on the board, and I review the vocabulary piece by piece with you. And usually I will ask, what was the context of this? If you can provide the context, you learn to do that as you write up, maybe not just a word, but a phrase now. And so we deal with vocabulary item by item, and that's great. And I don't know what you're going to encounter, because it's different every time, but I will tell you, consider that the idea of connecting or being associated with, that sign is very powerful, and it's not quite half of the vocabulary, but probably a good 5% of the vocabulary that comes up can be conveyed by this, because there's some correlation, there's a relationship going on, there's an association between this concept and another. You might, I'm running out of the, look it up in a thesaurus and all those thesaurus items for connection and relationship in those words I just said. A thesaurus will serve you well. Or thesaurus.com or whatever resources you have online. So, normally you'd have a list that you'd throw on the board, and normally I would review everything with you. That's going to be overly tedious for me to do in this process. So, instead, I would like you to think about this and discuss it with your team members. And your team members are your class members. So, you put onto the discussion boards, here's the vocabulary items I wasn't sure what to do with, here's what I think each of them means, and here's the signs I was thinking of using. And try to, as we try to teach you glossing, we try to get you to come up with glosses that everybody understands. That gloss means that sign, and there's little confusion. So you'll muddle through that as best as you can, and throw videos into it if that's useful and helpful. Or video chat with each other and show each other the signs that you were using for these concepts, and discuss it. It's not that important that I tell you what my versions of signs are. What's important is that you thought about it and figured out a path of how you can get to the idea. Because chances are you can come up with more than one path, and all of them have merit and value, and there might be one better than another one, but you can probably figure that out in the context later on once you've thought about it. If you never think about these things, you'll never have a plan when they hit you in the real world. So all of this is intended to be practice doing it, put yourself in a situation that you have to think like an interpreter on the spot, and I need to have a better ability to get through a message without having to fingerspell anything. Right? I can fingerspell names and titles, but otherwise you shouldn't have to fingerspell anything except maybe some technical jargon from time to time. So here's the magic that comes on with this. This is worth 100 points. How do I get you to do 15 hours of ghost interpreting or real interpreting? That's fine. And count it to be 100 points. Well, I'll reward you a little bit to get started and a lot to get finished. So I'm going with 5 points for the first 10 hours each. That's 50 points. And then 10 points for the last 5 hours each. Another 50 points. So here's, so I did 1 hour of ghost interpreting. Yay, you got 5 points. 95 missing, buddy. Get to it. I did 10 hours of ghost interpreting. Yay, you got half the number of points available. I did 14 hours. All right, 90 points, 10 to go. So 15 hours is what's expected. What does it mean to get 15 hours? 15 hours means that you were present in the room and ready to interpret for 46.5 minutes or more, because we can round up at 15-minute increments to the hour. You did 35 minutes, so that's 45 minutes. If that's all you can get, okay, I want you to think of it as 3/4 of an hour and not an hour. I want you to get as close to, come on, it's only 15 hours, to get as close to that target amount during the time of the course. So yeah, you could do all of these in 1 week if you have a good week of opportunity. You might not want to spread this out a little bit so you have a chance to learn some strategies, so the next time you do it, you can employ the strategies that you figured out from the last one, right? If you do everything in 1 week, then you've run out of hours and you might not learn anything or apply anything that you've learned in that process soon enough to make it stick. Okay. So there you go. That's ghost interpreting. The next video we'll talk about the observations.